Hello and welcome back to my channel. Bonsoir et re-bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and this evening I will be doing a TV show review for Dark, produced by Netflix. Now yes, I'm aware Dark has been out for a while, a year, 2 years by now. I took my sweet time going through it. I actually started it and then stopped it for a while and then finally finished it like a month ago. But still, since I've decided I wanted to allow myself to do cinematic art reviews, I wanted to review that TV series because it was actually really good. I really enjoyed it, and it's science fiction. So, you know, I thought, why not? Why not talk about it? Why not share my thoughts about this TV show? If you're somehow not aware, Dark is a German TV show that was produced for Netflix? I'm not sure about that there. I guess it's a German TV show, and that's also kind of why I wanted to talk about it, because when it comes to cinema and TV, I'm just overwhelmingly more familiar with Anglo-Saxon productions. So whether I mean productions from the UK or, you know, the US, Canada, and I guess Australia and New Zealand, and less so with like continental European productions, except for now Dark, and also La Casa del Papel, which is a Spanish TV show also on Netflix, but not SFF at all. So yes, Dark is a German science fiction TV show in 3 seasons. Each season is about 8 episodes, 8 or 10, so fairly short, and over time I've come to prefer shorter TV shows, shorter seasons, but then, you know, with like longer episodes of like minimum 40 minutes to even 50 minutes. And so the hook, if you will, for Dark is that it deals very directly with a main theme, which is time travel and time loops, time travel loops. And what that does to a core of families in this relatively small German town of Winden, which is built next to a nuclear power plant as well. I mean, the town was there first, and then came the nuclear power plant, but I mean, that has significance to the series. I'll try to keep this review fairly spoiler-free as well, so if you want to check it out and you haven't yet, well, you can do so going in reasonably blind. So quick synopses beyond like the basic hook I just gave you. So you have this small town in Germany called Winden with a core of interrelated families, and it centers initially around the character of Jonas, whose father committed suicide, and he takes a few months away from town and school, I think, to stay at a psychiatric clinic, and then he comes back, and I mean, you see his relationships with his friends at school, and basically the little brother of one of his friends, not that close of a friend, but one of like this group of friends, goes missing. And there's this weird cave system in Winden, and there's also this nuclear power plant, and so this little boy goes missing, and then another little boy shows up, dead. And they realize that this boy went missing 33 years prior. So the present timeline, if you will, takes place in 2019. And so this other boy went missing in 1986 and is the younger brother of the father of the now missing little boy. The police in Winden quickly realize that there's something is just off, because this boy, which went missing in 1986, his corpse looks like it just died. And they're like, wait, but that's not possible. So a lot of weird questions start cropping up. And there's this also strange, mysterious figure that comes to Winden to stay in a hotel with weird diagrams that look related to physics. And like I said, this is not a spoiler, you know this going in. This series deals with time travel. And so without going into details of exactly how this happens, you quickly come to understand that in Winden, so there's this cave system, and this cave system gives access to 3 different branches of time. And each time there's a gap of 33 years. And so there's a lot of characters meeting versions of themselves which come from the future, which are from the past, and people going from one timeline, well, not a timeline, but going from the future to the present to the past. And all of these main characters belonging to this core set of families are linked in a certain way. Linked genetically because this person had a child with that person, or linked because versions from the past did things with versions from the future. Time travel shenanigans times 1,000, and this tightly knit community interrelated in the strangest ways imaginable. and the drama that unfolds from that. And also this core mystery of like, why is time travel possible in this village? Now, visually, Dark is extremely atmospheric. The setting of this little town of Winden, I'm not exactly sure where it's supposed to be situated in Germany. I looked it up at some point, but I've forgotten where it's supposed to be. But you've got these dark hardwood forests. It's grey a lot of the time, and rainy and foggy, and you've got this small town ambience, which is at times fairly oppressive actually, and a lot of the characters are sick and tired of this small town and the small town mentality that goes with it, and they want to get out of Winden. And there are all these tragedies attached to Winden, with also this nuclear power plant next to it, which is kind of like the economic heart of that town as well. And there's some beautiful shots as well of like the surrounding forests, this cave which looks very menacing, and the intimate settings where you have just characters interacting with one another. So visually I thought it was, maybe striking is not quite the right word, but distinctive. It had a distinctive visual aura. I also think the creators of the show did a very good job of representing like different time periods, because there's lots of time travel going on with gaps of 33 years. So you have 2019, you have the 1980s, and then you also have the 1950s. And each setting is very recognizably of that time period, like the 1950s, the 1920s, the 1980s. So that was very well done as well. Ultimately, it's fairly subtle science fiction. I'm not sure that's quite the right word, because it deals heavily with time travel, and time travel is one of the, for lack of a better word, fuckiest themes to deal with in science fiction, in my experience in any case. So there are that many special effects is what I meant by subtle science fiction. There's some special effects which are needed to deal with some of the explanations for why there is time travel in this place. And it was fine. Honestly, I think it looked fine actually for what it needed to be. It could have been fancier, but I didn't think it looked cheap or didn't have anything to envy to like bigger Anglo-Saxon Hollywood type productions as far as I'm concerned. Now, OST and sound design wise, this is where I have less things to say. The sound design was fine. The OST was good actually. There were very distinctive musical themes for different situations and different types of character interactions, and those, you know, repeated themselves. When a musical cue began, you were like, okay, this is what we're going to deal with, and the musical theme really fit well with the type of scenery it was accompanying, or the type of character interaction, the type of thematic development, I guess. But it's nothing that was mind-blowing either. It's not the kind of OST I would listen to outside of watching the series, basically, but it did its job just fine. I will say this though, I found the intro montage with music, what do you call that? In French it's a générique, I don't know what's called in English, whatever. The intro scene, imagery, what have you, you know what I mean. That was actually really cool. It played a lot with like kaleidoscope type images, mirror images that created weird, creepy shapes with a song that just fit in very well with the theme and dark atmosphere of Dark. Also, I should actually specify this. I have no idea what the... Well, that's not quite true. The dubbing, the English dubbing is decent, but I watched most of it in the original German. In general, I don't like to see dubbed TV shows or dubbed movies. Definitely not for something that's in one of my native languages, but I mean, if it's something in German, in Chinese, in Arabic, what have you, I like to watch it in the original language with subtitles. That's just my personal preference. Plus, I actually like German as a language, so I watch the vast majority of it in German. Now I'm going to move on to the character work and the acting. Since it's an original production, it's not based on a book or anything, so I'm going to talk about the character work in and of itself, but also the acting. The acting, as far as I was concerned, was again good. I don't know that I'm the best judge of acting quality. I guess I can recognize when the acting is bad, but between like very good and great excellent, I mean, I could sort of distinguish, but as far as I'm concerned, the acting was good. There was a wide variety of characters, of performances, male, female, different age ranges. The cool thing about Dark, though, is that it features the same character, but at different ages. So you're a direct witness of the evolution, psychology-wise, of one character, but not through like normal chronological progression. You can have at some point in a room a character at 16 years old, 30, and then 80 years old, which is very weird, and I'm gonna talk about this a bit more in a minute in the theming section. So that was really neat, and I have to give props to the creators of the show for casting actors which actually look like one another, even though they're completely different people, but they look like all the versions of the younger characters. That was really well done. And so with the character development itself, because you have these different aged characters, you have a very interesting way of doing character development. But even for a character within a single age range, if that makes sense, it was very satisfying character development. Like I said, it's a wide variety of types of people represented in the series that deal with situations and trauma and grief and things like that in very different ways, and sometimes in very unhealthy ways. And the interaction between all the characters was also very rich overall. It really centers on these tightly interrelated families and the many links that bind all of them together. It was just fascinating to see that unfold over 3 seasons and see the ramifications of that throughout time, throughout the growth of those different characters. I mean, this is a very science fiction-y series because of the very strong importance of the time travel element and theme, but it's also just a really good human character drama, family drama, relationship drama, but drama in the noble sense of the word. Just looking at human relationships, how complex they can be, how nuanced they are or can be, how the people around you affect you as an individual, what kind of consequences that will have in the future, how what happened in the past with your parents or your grandparents also affects what's happening to you in the present. So yeah, again, it's very rich in that respect. And so now theme-wise, I don't really need to talk about the world building as such because the time travel element is just a core part of the theming. I could just touch upon very quickly the way science around time travel was developed and explained. It was fine. It was what it needed to be, I think, overall. Not perfect, but it's next to impossible to be perfect with something like time travel. Let's just be real about this. So there are areas where there are gaps and you're like, you just have to go along with it. But overall, it was just treated as something very serious, and it was based on elements of today understood science in any case. But so theme-wise, there are a few themes present in Dark, developed throughout the 3 seasons of the show. Definitely family, obviously, because you have these 3 or 4 interrelated families. So family inheritances, family burdens that you inherit from your ancestors or your descendants, given the fucking nature of time travel present in this TV series. Family, relationships, friendships, just how human beings are fundamentally entangled with one another. There's a strong message of like the interconnectedness of people, but also just things, of space and time, of the past, the present, and the future. And all of that is just one big circle, maybe not a circle quite. The symbol uses the triquetra, so the thing that goes like this, which is not quite a circle, but also just a looping symbol where everything is interconnected and going around itself. And then something I also picked up on is grief, coping with grief, loss, I guess trauma more generally, but grief quite specifically, because you have parents losing their children, children losing their parents, lovers losing one another, so grieving for people who die, grieving for people who just leave your life, grieving for dead relationships. Grief is very present in Dark. I mean, like the title of the series suggests, it deals with dark themes, with the dark aspects of the human psyche, with the dark patches within a human being's soul, a human being's heart, things like that. In fact, grief has a very central role to play to the denouement of the entire series, but obviously I cannot say what that is because that would be major spoilers, but trust me on this, grief is very central to Dark. And so like I said, to me, just, it might not so much be a theme, but just a core thematic thread of the series is this idea that everything is interconnected, the interrelatedness of everything, human beings specifically, but you can apply this to more metaphysical considerations of just the universe, space, time, matter, everything is connected. Every action has a reaction. I mean, we're in hardcore physics, but this also goes into metaphysics, really, because God is talked about, not in any specifically anthropomorphic sense, but their equivalence is drawn between God and time, and this obsession humans have with time, with the passage of time, with this thing we call life that is contained between the moment you're born into the world and the moment you leave the world when you die. But how does that really work if time is fundamentally fluid and is multi-directional? So it gets pretty high-minded at times as well, but I love that kind of theming. That's just my jam. And finally, so this brings us to the time traveling itself. Time traveling is a support, basically, for the exploration of all these other themes, but it's the theme in itself insofar as the series presents you with questions of like, what would you do if you met yourself at a much older age or at a much younger age? How would you react to that? How does that potentially screw with your sense of self and your sense of identity? Because there's this very interesting line dropped about the fact that basically infinite versions of yourself existing on the time continuum. So every second of time contains a different version of yourself. Whether or not you agree quite with that formulation is just very thought-provoking. I was like, yeah, because I mean, that's a thing also explored with like the concept of parallel universes, like the idea that there's potentially an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of versions of yourself, or, you know, universes where you never existed and things like that. But here it's within this universe, but just taking the time variable into account, the time dimension into account, that the person I am now is a different entity in a way than the person I was a minute ago. And that fucks with you. I mean, it fucked with my head in any case. And so it just poses all these interesting questions about the nature of self just by considering what time is as a dimension. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And again, like, how does that mess with your psyche to just see yourself as a child? And if you could potentially, well, I mean, again, it's not really a spoiler. You'll see this very soon when you start the show. People talk to versions of themselves which are older or younger. So if you had the opportunity of meeting yourself as a child, what would you tell yourself? Or meeting yourself as an older person? What would that older version of yourself tell yourself in the present? I don't know. But I mean, it actually kept me up at night when I was watching the show. It's like, if I met myself as a child, what would I say? What advice would I give myself? But then, obviously, that goes into time traveling paradoxes, because if that had happened, then I would remember having experienced that, right? And it's just so fucky, right? But that's just the nature of the beast that is time travel. That was brilliant in a way. It's either one of the or the best exploration I've seen of time travel, and one of the richest ways I've seen time travel being used to explore other themes as well. So I definitely want to give high marks to Dark for doing that. It doesn't do it flawlessly. I think that's basically impossible at this point, but it does it extremely well and in very interesting ways. And so some concluding remarks. Overall, I rated Dark as a whole at a solid, very respectable 8 out of 10. The one thing I would have appreciated more with regards to the time travel specifically is that I wished the mindfuckery of time travel itself had been expressed more overtly by some of the characters. Because I was like, at some point, if you're in a room with 3 different versions of yourself in front of you, how does your brain not explode? I was like, there's no way an average person could just take that in their stride. There's no way. That has to fuck with your mind to a pathological extent. That would send you to the loony bin after a while, I think. Our brains are not meant to deal with this shit. That's my fundamental belief. Our brains are not meant to mess with those fundamentals of the universe in a way. And if we did, I think it would drive us insane, which is what I kind of like about Lovecraftian fiction or some works of science fiction which deal with the fundamentally unknowable for human beings. That to me is a bit more realistic. And I'm like, when you're just dabbling with time travel to such extreme extents as they do in Dark, it has to break your brain at some point. That's my one bit of criticism with regards to that. Otherwise, I thought it was very well done and very richly explored thematically, don't get me wrong. But now, I said I was happy that it was a 3-season TV show, though conversely, I think the 3rd season was perhaps a tad bit rushed because it introduced an additional science fiction-y concept into the mix. And I wonder if they just didn't take on too much of a load there, storytelling-wise. I mean, they wrapped it all up fairly convincingly as well, but some things were just kind of rushed over, which was a bit disappointing, but okay, fine. Overall, I was still satisfied by the ending. I thought the ending was actually quite poetic in a way, fairly moving, and it felt right. It wasn't perhaps entirely convincing from a purely science fictional point of view, but emotionally it felt right and it felt satisfying overall. So I'm not going to complain more than that. I can be very difficult with TV series endings, and this one was much more positive than negative. So yeah, I would definitely recommend you check this TV series out. I mean, Netflix is known to be very inconsistent with the quality of its products. It can create great movies, TV shows, documentaries, and absolute trash fires as well for some reason. But Dark is definitely in the excellent category. So if you're into science fiction, time travel, but even, being interested in the human aspects within science fiction, definitely check out Dark. Also, I just want to add this very quickly. What I find unique about Dark is that it messes about with time travel, but in a very intimate way. Like, a lot of science fiction stories deal with time travel in like end of the world situations. I want to go back in time to kill Hitler. I mean, I'm stereotyping, obviously. Things like that. Here, it really has to do with the consequences of this little town in like semi-industrial Germany and the lives of these individuals. It's very intimate in its focus. That is really what made Dark quite special. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it. Not perfect, but what is at this point? And I mean, especially when we're dealing with time travel, it's next to impossible to make something perfect. At least that's what I believe. So that's it for my review of the Netflix TV show Dark. If you've watched it, please do share your thoughts in the comments down below if you feel so inclined. In the meantime, I hope you'll have a lovely day, evening, or whichever time of day you prefer. Take good care of yourselves, and I shall see you whenever in the next video. Bye-bye.